Hello and welcome back. My name is Levi, and in today's video we are talking about this Fender Blacktop Jaguar HH guitar. That's a dual humbucker version. Today I'm going to record a little demo with this guitar, and then I'm going to tell you what I think of it and kind of whether or not I think it's kind of a good guitar or not. So the Fender Blacktop line was a series of guitars Fender had released. These were made in Mexico, and they announced these in 2010. I believe they started shipping out in 2011, and I don't know exactly how long they ran this Blacktop series for. It's kind of a cool series of guitars at the time where they were taking kind of these classic designs and making dual humbucker versions of it. There was a few different other types as well, but one that I always wanted to try was the Jaguar one, and I'm lucky to have this one in my hands. This one was loaned to me from a friend, and basically the big question I want to answer is this guitar still good and viable today, even if you were to buy it on the used market? So let's dig into it and find out. So how did that demo sound? Let me know in the comments below. And there's one major issue that I gotta bring up kind of like first before I get into kind of anything else, and it's that this guitar has kind of a major noise issue. I'd say that there's two major factors when it comes to this. One is the grounding, the other is shielding. Now I haven't really taken this guitar fully apart to examine what the shielding is, but basically when you compare the kind of like noise floor of this guitar versus any of my other guitars, this one is substantially louder, and I would say that that is a problem that could be easily fixed with a visit to a guitar tech. It might cost a little bit extra money, but you're gonna make this guitar, which is very well built, into something that's actually usable for higher gain settings. Now I just want to quickly illustrate to you kind of what this noise issue is like. So I've got a high gain setting on my amp here. We get this hum that hovers around minus 35 dB, but when we take our hands off the guitar, the noise level increases quite a bit. The funny thing is, when we're touching the strings, the noise quiets down quite a bit, and the same thing kind of happens when I touch this metal plate or the bridge. But funny thing is, when I touch the switch, the noise gets worse. It should not be reacting in that way, unless you want a bunch of white noise ruining your signal. Now let's compare it with a guitar that's grounded and shielded properly. Now there definitely is still some noise, but it's not as pronounced as it was with the other guitar. Because guitars are naturally a handmade thing, there might be kind of varying levels of some being better shielded and better grounded than others. In this case, I find this guitar just to be a little bit more noisy than I like. If you have the same issue, here are my quick tips for a workaround. Keep your fingers on the strings at all times. As soon as you let go of that, you can get some more buzz. Another tip I've got for you is to use a noise gate. Basically, we want to have that noise gate loud enough so we can let our fingers off the strings and not have any noise come out, because the noise gate is doing our job for us, which is nice. And then when we play, we just got to play hard enough to overcome that noise gate, and it's a fine balance, right? Because when you have a noise gate that high, you lose a lot of that kind of fine touch stuff, like kind of like cuts off a little bit there, right? But if you're playing loud and hard, then you're probably all right. So that's something you can practice to kind of overcome if you're gigging with a guitar like this. Another thing too is just to be disciplined with your volume control. Whenever you're not actually playing, that volume control should be all the way down, and that kind of solves your problem for you. As for specs, we're dealing with pretty standard stuff. We've got an Alder body, which is nice for a Fender brand guitar. It's a real good wood, I would say. We've got our standard maple neck with the skunk stripe and a rosewood fretboard. This one is a nice dark rosewood. Now this, because it's a used guitar, it's got some gunk and stuff built up on here, which makes it look a little darker, but regardless, it's fairly nicely put together. We got kind of these cream dots, nothing too fancy on there. We've got like that 70s oversized headstock on them. Non-locking tuners, but they are Fender brand. These ones are honestly pretty good tuners in my experience. Nice simple kind of logo. This is a synthetic bone nut, which is kind of cool. I mean, that's not too bad, I'd say. So far with me playing it, the frets have felt pretty good. 22 medium jumbo frets, 3-way selector switch. These are supposed to be like high output Alnico humbucker pickups. I think they're pretty good. I think these pickups have a lot of broad appeal. I think they could be applied to a lot of different styles of music. They have pretty good clean tone. Pretty good distortion sound. I'm not in love with the high gain sound on these, but that's just my opinion. Everyone's gonna have their own kind of thing. If you bought this thing and you wanted to play metal, you might want to put like, you know, metal kind of pickups in there. And I would have to say that this Jaguar is kind of more stripped down from your standard Jaguar, because standard Jaguars have 3 switches here and then some switches here, and sometimes they'll have this like tremolo system and stuff, right? Whereas this one's a lot more kind of bare bones, but it's kind of nice for a lot of players because like, although it's cool to have all those switches and stuff, you gotta question whether all that is like really that useful to you. And I would say that this guitar was made for kind of players with more kind of straightforward, simple tastes. I would say that this guitar could probably rival a Gibson SG or Epiphone SG because of the way it's kind of laid out. Dual humbuckers, 22 frets, fairly short scale length. It's nice and easy and comfortable to work with. Not too bad at all. And it's got that kind of Gibson style tune-o-matic and tail piece like this. But funny thing, Fender calls this an adjusto-matic and a anchored tail piece. So they're a little bit different names, but they're fundamentally the same things. I really like these skirted kind of top hat looking knobs. They definitely have a cool vibe to them. They're a little bit different than the stuff I usually see. And that was kind of specific to the Blacktop series. They had these types of knobs, and I thought it was a good choice. One big thing that a lot of newer guitar players aren't aware of is that the Jaguar is actually a shorter scale length than the Jazzmaster. They both share the same kind of style of body. However, this one has a 24-inch scale length. So basically what that means is that it's got a shorter vibrating length in the string compared to the Fender Strat or the Gibson Les Paul or SG. The Fender Strat has a 25.5-inch scale length. The Gibson SG has a 24.75-inch scale length, and this one has a 24-inch scale length, so it's even shorter. So with that being said, I think this guitar could suit some players with potentially smaller hands because it can allow you to reach bigger spacings. For example, when I play this 9th chord here, it feels a lot easier and closer together than it does on a standard size guitar. Also, a nice thing about the shorter scale length is that it requires a little bit less tension to have on the strings, so your bar chords are a little bit easier. One thing that kind of surprised me about this guitar, even though it's a shorter scale length, the actual length of the overall guitar is longer than a Fender Stratocaster. So I initially thought, oh, maybe this is like better for travel, but ultimately it's, I would say, no better for travel than a full-size Stratocaster would be. One kind of downside to that short scale length that I personally don't like is that the frets up here get really close together. So if you spend any considerable amount of time up in the high register around here, it's just a little bit kind of cramped, like more cramped than it would be on a Les Paul. And that's okay, I guess, but just not my preference, really. It's got a 9.5-inch radius on the fretboard, so it's basically like more round than a lot of other guitars. And I think that smaller fretboard radius is good for chords and stuff, whereas your flatter neck radius is kind of better for leads, shredding, soloing, that kind of stuff. So that neck radius might be a preference thing. I don't really have any gripes with it. So as for build quality, I think that this is actually a very well built guitar. I don't have any problems with the build itself. Like the neck feels good, the knot feels like it was cut right, the tuners and all that stuff. They don't seem to have any major issues that I'm aware of. I'm not aware of any kind of major gaps in the neck pocket, so it seems pretty good, aside from that noise issue that I had mentioned previously, which is a fairly straightforward fix if you bring it to a tech or if you're really handy with that type of thing. Honestly, aside from that kind of noise issue that we had, I think this is a really great guitar. It's got a cool vibe with that offset body style, which is kind of a cool and unique thing that we see a lot of artists using. And then, of course, it's nice and comfortable to play if you've got smaller hands, or if you like to do these kind of crazy extended chord voicings that span across a lot of different frets, right? If, for example, you're into like jazz and stuff and you have smaller hands and you want to do crazy chord shapes, I think this kind of thing works really, really well, right? But it also is a very versatile guitar that's capable of doing a lot of different things while maintaining a very simple layout. So would I recommend the Fender Blacktop Jaguar HH? Yes, but only if it's not giving you a major noise issue. Aside from that, this is a very solid and well-built guitar. My buddy who's owned it since new has gigged this a bunch. He says he's abused it and it still is in really good shape, and I can definitely attest to that. It doesn't have any kind of dings or chips in the finish. Now there's a little bit of like scratches from the actual pick, and there's like some corrosion kind of patina built up on your nickel plated parts, but honestly it's a very nice guitar and it definitely is an inspiring one to play once you get past that noise issue. And is this guitar from 2011 still a viable and good guitar by today's standards? I would say yeah, it's pretty good, and with it being over a decade old, you're probably pretty likely to be able to find one of these on the used market for a fairly good deal, and it still holds up. It's still quite a good guitar. I just recommend playing through one of these guitars before you buy it, and just do the touch test just to make sure that touching these doesn't kind of create any extra noise. Oh, and one more thing. Check out this video here and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you over there.